Welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show, your one-stop shop for weird news, spooky, and otherworldly and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow Creepin' It Real Show on Twitter at creepin_it. You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, creepinitrealshow.com.
Hello and welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show. I am one of your hosts, Miss Moni, and I want to open this up today with Miss Kristi over in Atlanta. How are you doing?
Hello, surviving. It's a beautiful day, beautiful weekend, but with that brings, unfortunately, in the state of Georgia, and anybody who lives here will be nodding, the pollen has landed. And when I say pollen has landed, I mean, Moni, it's like sand on a beach. It is everywhere.
Gross.
Everything turns yellow, including your own face, and I have some sort of head cold or whatever. It was funny. My husband was washing his car yesterday. I walked outside, and he just kept wiping it, and I'm like, why are you doing that? Because every 15 seconds, he would turn around, and more pollen would be on his car, and he has a black car, so it was kind of hysterical to watch him do that. But anyway, so I apologize in advance. My head is stuffy, and something's going on, whether it's a cold or the official spring fever. I don't know, but happy to be here and excited to talk about today's show.
Well, I hope you feel better soon. I am on week 3, and I count that by podcasts that we've recorded in that time of some kind of cough thing. And everybody's like, when are you going to go to the doctor? So I've been coughing through the shows. And since this is my show today, this should be interesting. But in the meantime, Yardley, are you feeling better than we're feeling?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I can definitely co-sign with Kristi that there is pollen. It doesn't seem to be as bad here in the city as it is, up there where you are.
That's because we got a lot of more foliage everywhere, probably.
Yeah, but I feel you on that. I mean, I see the stuff on my car, but the weather's been pretty good, and I see a lot of people are starting to get their planting on, so I know that the gardens are starting to pop right now, and I look forward to that.
There's a tree up in the burbs that if you have a home that's in, around the 80s or the 90s, it's called a Bradford pear, and they planted them when they were building all these neighborhoods because it grows really, really fast. And they're beautiful. They the entire tree, it's big, and it blooms these beautiful white flowers, but they reek like fish. And I'm not kidding you. They reek like dead fish. And so you always know they're coming. And again, sorry. The minute I walked outside, I was like, I didn't even need to see the trees because they're all over my neighborhood. We actually had to remove ours because they have really shallow roots and they fall over really easily. And I could smell them. The smell just smacks you in the face. And you're like, did I just walk into a wharf town and I'm on the deck of a fishing boat? Like, really, that's how bad it smells. And my son won't even go outside and play. It's that bad. So it's like,
it sounds like a metaphor for perfect suburban livelihood.
Seriously, you walk, they're so beautiful. You'll drive down the street and you're like, ooh, so pretty. And then you get out of the car and you're like, Jesus Christ. It's like, oh, God, you run in the house. Oh, they're hysterical. It's, again, beautiful, but it's nasty smelling.
Well, on that note, speaking of nasty things, Yardley, tell us about this Atlanta murder case opened up your way.
Yes, they are reopening the case of the famed or infamous Atlanta child murders, and these were murders that were taking place that claimed the lives of 22 black children between 1979 and 1981. So they're essentially reopening the cases to re-examine the evidence because they want to make sure that, with all of the the technologies and the things that they have today, they really do want to bring some attention back to this and reevaluate some things, do some new tests and things like that to kind of give the families a little bit more closure. Now, there's also a documentary that's coming out about the Atlanta child murders with Wayne Williams being highlighted. He's a person who, he actually went to prison for killing 2 adults, but a lot of people are trying to tie the 22 murders to him as well, but there's no evidence of that. And depending on who you ask, some people think that it's Wayne Williams, and other people think that, especially during that time, there were a lot of racial issues going on. Some people blame the Klan, but there's no more evidence with that than they have with Wayne Williams. But different people, if you ask them down here, kind of have different opinions on who they think committed it, or if it was a combination of a bunch of other things. But that's something that was just told to Atlanteans by our mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, just a couple of days ago. So I think that is something that I'm kind of curious to see what, comes out of it, as well as this documentary series. And I don't have an air date for this series, and I'll probably post it on the page when I do. But it's a 3-hour documentary that's going over these things. Wayne Williams, who was convicted of killing 2 adults, he's still in prison. So it's been almost I guess close to 40 years that he's been in, and his lawyer had released a statement that there's nothing that's going to be found that would link, his client to those murders. But it's also considered, and I don't know if you've heard this, Kristi, they call them the forgotten murders, because, at the time nationally, it was a big deal because they had a campaign where they were actually running commercials where they were asking the people watching TV, do you know where your kids are? Because it's after 10 p.m. So it was a big deal at the time. Of course, the news cycle back then isn't like the news cycle now, where if it gets dumped on a Friday, it's forgot about, on Monday. It was a little bit different back then. But hey, it's something that I look forward to watching. So I'll be tracking, and I'll make sure that I let everyone know when the documentary will air.
I actually have this saved on my watch list. I want to say it's April 6th. Reason why is I have it on a list of things to watch and us do a show about it. I would love to cover this full scope on a show once we get a little bit more information from the documentary. I'm so glad that she's chosen to reopen this case because, from what little bit of information you can surmise is this was the 70s and the early 80s. I still think that, and I think it's still a problem today, African Americans not getting the investigations and due process that white people at the time were getting. And so it's very much implied, especially in this documentary, that they're little, and I think they even said, it's little black boys, nobody cares. And that, I think, was like a quote from back then that somebody was talking about. It did make national news, and then Atlanta just kind of half-hearted did the investigations and shuffled them off to the side. So I'm really happy that she's decided to reopen this case. And with all the cases that they're solving now with DNA, surely out of 22 little boys, there's something there that they can find.
Yeah, and the information that I didn't have earlier, even though I'll probably trust you as far as the air date of being April the 6th, but it's on the Discovery Channel, right?
Yes. Which is like basically when I turn the TV on, I automatically go to channel 285. Discovery ID is like my lifeline. I love that channel. I'm always watching it. And so I have seen this commercial so many times that it has just literally ingrained into my brain because they are marketing the shit out of it right now. And I want to say, because I was sitting there and I was like, that's the day I get back from spring break. And so that date stuck with me. So I know something that I really want to see is on that date, and I want to say it's this documentary. So for anybody who's interested, check it out. Look for, God, what was the name of, do you know the name of the documentary? I can't think of the name of it, but it'll be easy to find. This is a very, very popular case that's come up and coming, especially now they've just opened up the investigation. So
yeah, and also part of the purpose of the documentary is, of course, for them exploring how the cases were handled, but it also has the other side of pretty much if Williams is truly the killer, because this guy has had, that's 22 murders, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think they need to do their due diligence, but yeah, we'll definitely follow up on this. I'd be excited to do a show as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad they're reopening it. I hadn't even heard about this, so I think it's important to have that exposure and that closure for the families. Speaking of closure of big cases, Kristi, I'm obsessed with the Jack the Ripper case.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
I mean, as another one of in the back of my mind, we're going to be doing a show, of course, on Jack the Ripper. I don't know why it's the most famous, murder case, unsolved murder case of all time. I think it's just kind of has a cult following. And it seems like every other year somebody has a new, I know who Jack the Ripper was type of story.
Well, we did a show presenting that the killer might have been female. Do you remember that?
I do remember. But according to forensic scientists, they think that they figured out the identity. Now, there are some holes in this, and I read it, and I've read several articles about what they found and different opinions and options. Scientists say that Jack the Ripper was actually somebody that they had, who was a suspect at the time of the murders. Aaron Kosminski, 23-year-old Polish barber. He was a prime suspect, but there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him. There is a shawl found in one of the murders. I believe it was Catherine. I'm going to butcher these names. I apologize. Eddowes. She was the fourth victim in 1888. Good God, that was a long time ago. It was her shawl, and it was found, or they assume it was her shawl. It was found next to her body. Speckled with what is claimed to be blood and semen, later to be from the killer. 4 other women in London were also murdered in a 3-month spree. The culprit has never been confirmed. Now, I'm not going to read through this entire article. My own brain can pretty much, first question is, it had blood and semen in it. What was her job? Now, it's assumed because he killed prostitutes that she was a prostitute. And he was a suspect because this body was close to where he lived. Now, we could assume that maybe he was a customer who just happened to have some bad luck to have, hooked up with her right before she was murdered. Or he was the killer. But they did run DNA test on the shawl and compared it with everybody who was the suspect's relatives, and his was a match. So, I mean, out of all the suspects and options, I am sort of prone to believe DNA evidence. I know sometimes there can be mistakes there, but to me, this is probably the strongest candidate, as far as this will probably never be solved, but hey, this is pretty damn close.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I could definitely go off on a tangent and talk about this all day. Mm-hmm. But instead, as the scat queen, I don't know, did we decide on a title? Resident scat queen, poop goddess? I'm not really sure.
Oh, gosh.
But some of my friends got a kick out of that moniker, so we'll have to keep working on it. So this story came from Reddit and is now on BuzzFeed, and the title is, I just learned what a poop knife is, and I refuse to suffer alone. And then subtitle, I'm so sorry.
Okay, before we start this story, okay,
yeah,
no, you're going to ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of a poop knife before?
Of course not.
I've read the story, so I know what they're talking about, but no, I had never heard of a poop knife. No, this was a first for me.
Okay, yeah, me too. And as resident poop queen, I mean, I brought it to you, but I did not know about it. So obviously I need to get a rein on my kingdom.
You are slacking.
I know, right? So apparently this, from Reddit again, this story was told, my family poops big. Maybe it's genetic, maybe it's our diet. I would go with that. But everyone births giant logs of crap. If anyone has laid a mega poop, you know it sometimes won't flush. I've never had that experience. It lays across the hole in the bottom of the bowl, and the vortex of draining water merely gives it a spin as it mocks you. Well, okay then. Growing up, this was common enough occurrence in our family that we had a poop knife. It was an old rusty kitchen knife. Well, I hope you didn't use the nice china that hung on a nail in the laundry room. only to be used for that purpose. Oh, Jesus. They just had it in a special room. I hope they washed it in between. It was normal to walk through. Yes.
Why wouldn't they just have a poop knife for each toilet if this was such a major issue? I mean, it's a knife. I mean, you can afford more than one knife, right? I mean, you would actually hang a knife in a central part of your home for the strict purposes of this. What this
Honestly,
is.
I'm concerned that you can't use a plastic knife and just throw it away when you're done.
Big enough.
That reuse. Okay, well, that's
I mean, think about dipping a plastic knife into a toilet. That's pretty deep. I would not want to risk dipping my finger in there with that little ass, measly ass plastic knife. I don't know, but
true. Anyway. I wouldn't want to risk digging my fingers in there. Anyway, I think I would just get a plunger or set my house on fire.
This is why we have toilets that claim they can flush 50 golf balls, so we don't need poop knives.
Oh, got it.
Well, I was wondering why they didn't just keep flushing. I know that they prefaced it with "it won't flush," but I don't think that I've ever took a poop.
They must have had they must have had those tiny little toilets from back in like the 70s and 80s. You know the ones I'm talking about, where the seat, it looks like a baby seat, you know, and they're tiny.
Yeah, theirs was not a throne. Theirs was more of like a little stool, I guess. A stool for stool. So it was normal for someone in the house and the family to call out, "Hey, can you get me the poop knife?" And I thought this was standard. You have a plunger, your toilet brush, and your poop knife.
Oh my God.
However, taking to the internet, there are gifs of people cutting logs with large saws. So get some dimensions. The story doesn't stop there. Fast forward to age 22. It's been a day or two between poops, and I'm over at my friend's house. My friend was a local dealer and always had guests over, but you can't buy weed without sitting on your ass and sampling it for an hour. I excuse myself and lay a gigantic turd. I look down and see that it's a sideways one, so I crack the door and call for my friend. He arrives, and I ask for his poop knife.
Sorry. I was like, how is this going to go wrong? Oh, God.
What? Your poop knife, I say. I need to use it, please. What the fuck is a poop knife? So, obviously, he has one, but maybe he just calls it by a delicate name. A fecal cleaver? A dung divider? A guanoglaive? I explain what it is and why I want it. And the stoner is judging you guys. This dealer stoner is judging this person. He's giggling, he's laughing, then everyone starts laughing, and the music stops, and everyone hears my pleas through the door. And it turns out that none of them had poop knives. It was just my fucked up family and our fucked up bowels. Fuck my life.
Oh my
God. Also, this man's wife did not know what that was either, which I'm pretty sure is normal. Yeah. So I would love if a listener would be so brave as to admit if they know of the existence of a poop knife, have ever had to use one. Maybe it's going to be TMI. I'm really opening Pandora's box here, but maybe you have a story about having to, make your poop smaller or how many flushes it takes. I don't know. But that's our story. And with that, we can move on to our main topic. Oh, real quick, just one more shameless plug. I swear this is the last one for now. WonderCon. I will be there starting the 29th, and I will be all over the place. I'm all over the schedule under my name, Moni. So come see me. There's going to be some awesome creators, some awesome things, and it's going to be a real celebration of fandom of comics and pop culture and all kinds of stuff. So come see me and say hi. I will definitely say hi. Anyways, moving forward to the movie Us. I'm just going to go right off the bat and ask you guys, did you like this movie or did you love this movie?
Did you want to go first, Kristi?
No, go ahead, Mardley. Moni and Yardley. There you go. See?
All right. When I left, I really liked it. And then after I got home and thought about it and then started watching, some content that showed me some things that I might have missed, and I started putting things together. Once I started kind of seeing the breakdowns and then having an opportunity to stew on it, I really liked it. So it's one of those things that probably between the time that I left the theater and like noon the next day, I really appreciated it more. But the different things that you appreciate, there's so many things that this movie gives insight to, that it's hard to necessarily pick one favorite thing that drew it to me. But I think a lot of the points that it was making were points that were valid for the times that we're in now.
Yeah, it's very layered. Kristi, did you like it?
I did. First of all, on the surface, just sitting down and watching the movie and not analyzing each piece, which is what we'll do today, I was scared. It freaked me out. It scared me, especially at the beginning when they first show up. Just the complete freakiness of it, putting yourself in these people's shoes and everything that was happening. I was scared. I left the theater a little bit confused, like, whoa, what was, I mean, I could tell this was a lot of our generation. There were so many like references to our generation, me and Yardley's. You were at the cusp of it. You know, you were too little to remember a lot of what.
I feel like I remember Hands Across America, which we'll get to in a minute.
Well, not just
I feel like that was familiar to me.
Everything. It was like everything when we were talking about just everything to do with the kids, and not just Hands Across America, but everything there was a just flashback to just our generation. And I know because that was her and that age, it just seemed major homage to so many things and classic pop culture in this movie. It was filled with it. But I was trying to tie it all together at the end when I left, and it left me a little bit confused until I kind of sat down and started to kind of analyze everything. And I was like, okay, I'm starting to kind of get it. It's very thought-provoking. I know that's pretty much what his movies are about. They're great, scary horror movies, but also there's a message there. Lots of different messages. So I liked it. And then after I sat down and really thought about it, I was like, wow. I mean, I really did think, I loved it after that. It was like, wow, this was scary when I left. And then sat down kind of like Yardley, and I was like, whoa, okay. Now these things are starting to kind of click together. And then it makes you really like it.
Yeah. Well, something else, actually, I want to throw this at you, Moni. Like, as far as the themes of this movie, were there any particular themes that stuck out to you?
Yeah, and actually, I want to run through the summary relatively quickly and then kind of come back to some of that. There are layers to this that I just saw it late last night, that I'm still kind of working through. And this is honestly something that, whether you're a horror fan or not, I would hope to have studied in film school someday. I know I'm the unpopular opinion here on this. I don't love Get Out. I like it. I really do think it's thought-provoking and says a lot of important things. It doesn't really scare me at all. I kind of saw the twist coming from the beginning, but I did appreciate it as a very well done first film. And then there was all kinds of hype about Us being like, is there going to be a sophomore slump, or is Peele going to nail it again? This movie hit every level for me because it scared the shit out of me. It was super interesting. It was incredibly well acted, just like Get Out was well acted. And there's a lot of layers and a lot of thought-provoking things in this. And so I'm going to go ahead and move into the summary. We'll talk about a couple points as we go through, but for the most part, I want to wait kind of until the end and go through like the Easter eggs and the different meanings of different things after you get a whole picture. So for those of you who haven't seen this film or planning to see it, don't want the spoilers, turn away now. Hope you enjoyed the first half of the show, but we're going to get into this. So in the movie, actually, it opens with some quotes about how America has a bunch of unused tunnels underneath us that have been there for centuries, and we don't know why they're there. And fast forwarding then to 1986, and we see that by the TV screen. A young Adelaide goes to the beach on a trip with her parents, and her father wins her a Thriller t-shirt, and you can kind of tell there's a lot of tension in the marriage, which I think played into it. The mom is kind of like, this better not scare her too much. She ends up wandering off while her dad is playing and her mom's going to the bathroom, and encountering, as she walks by, a lot of different things, actually, all the things that you see teenagers doing at a carnival in the 80s. But she also sees an unusual thing, which is a man who appears maybe to be homeless, holding a placard that says Jeremiah 11:11. And there are I found a more quote that's a little less Old Testament. It's easier to read. What that 11:11 quote means, and you see that again in the film, is, therefore, this is what the Lord says, I will bring on them a disaster that they cannot escape. Although they cry out to me, I will not listen to them. And that's part of a longer passage where God tells Jeremiah that he's going to punish people for forgetting the covenant of their forefathers. And he's going to basically return them to the sins of their forefathers. And I think that's an important message here when we're looking at race. And I think it's also an important message when you're just looking at what we're going to see as called the tethered, basically the duality of human beings, and how we all have a darker past that just because you've moved forward from it doesn't mean you've escaped it. So yes, it talks about bringing judgment upon ourselves for our own ugly history, and it just sets kind of a nice creepy tone for the rest of the film. Also, the significance of the Thriller t-shirt, Yardley mentioned that it shows the duality. Again, we see the duality of personalities. It's a case of a human turning into a wolf, and actually Jordan Peele said, Michael Jackson is probably the patron saint of duality. The movie starts in the 80s. The duality with which I experienced him, Michael Jackson, in that time, was he was a guy that presented an outward positivity, but also the Thriller video, which scared me to death. And of course, this movie was completed before the Leaving Neverland came out on HBO. But Peele does add now that the irony and relevance is not lost on me now that the discussion has evolved to one of true terror.
Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of really, really interesting now, even more so. But it just shows the brilliance of Peele. I mean, he's even like kind of ahead of the curve on things. So anyway, Adelaide, inside, she's terrified by mirrors and a vibe of the place. And eventually we see her, she starts whistling, for starters. She's whistling the Itsy Bitsy Spider, and that theme comes up. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But she also turns and sees herself, her exact self, which scares her. And it doesn't seem to be a mirror self. But of course, when she tells the story later, it just sounds like you saw yourself in a mirror in a funhouse. That's how that works. It scares her, and we cut to her in a therapist's office, and her parents are saying that they really want their daughter back, that she doesn't speak anymore, which is also very significant and a little clue to the twist at the end. And I also just want to note that before she goes into this funhouse and kind of loses her innocence and her childhood happiness, she is eating something red, which is a red candy apple.
Mm-hmm.
So years later, she's an adult, and she brings her two tween-age kids to the beach, to the house that her family owns up there. Her husband, Gabe, played by Winston Duke, who's fucking hilarious in this. Did you guys love him?
I loved him. He was hysterical.
You know what else? I really appreciated that there were times that I was scared shitless in this movie, and then they bring the comedy with him, and it kind of helped me not pee my pants, so that was nice.
Yeah.
But their children, Azora and Jason, and the family's having lunch at the beach house, and we find out several things. And one is that the beach trip was to help the kids cope with the death of their grandmother. And the other is that Adelaide appears to still be terrified of the idea of going to the beach because of what had happened to her when she was a child. And she at first refuses to go. And she's seen eating a red strawberry. That's the last food we see her eat before everything goes to shit again. After some persuasion, she decides to go to the beach with her family. And on the way, they see a man being brought into an ambulance, and it's the same man that she encountered many years ago who had been holding the Jeremiah 11:11 placard. So at the beach, the family meets their friends, the Tylers. Oh my God, were they hilarious? What did you guys think of the Tylers?
Yeah, they totally look like somebody who would be your friends, you know what I mean? Yeah. Some of the cues in this movie, though, was kind of the way that Adeline was conversing with the Tylers. It seemed kind of off. You know what I mean?
She mentions that it's hard for her to speak, which again is another cue about what comes at the end of the film. So yeah, she's trying to have a conversation. And at first I kind of just thought like maybe she was distracted because obviously she's anxious about being at this beach. I also thought that she, they're casual friends, but you could tell just the way that the Wilson family is so just like la-di-da, and we're drinking, and the marriage doesn't seem as good maybe as the other families and all that stuff. So I thought that might have been playing into it, but yeah, that's super significant that she has trouble speaking. So Elizabeth Ann Moss, who I love, and her husband, and their two fucking nightmare twin teenage daughters, Gwen and Maggie, who are just, your brother's so weird, and, the cool girls. So they're at the beach, and Kitty and Adelaide talk about how she used to be a ballet dancer. Adelaide used to be a ballet dancer. And Jason wanders off on his own and finds a man with outstretched arms who is dripping with blood from his fingers. Adelaide notices her son missing and panics, and eventually finds him and decides that it's time for the family to go back to the house. So what did you guys think about this scene? Were you nervous for Jason, or did you kind of see where that was going?
I mean, I was, because I wasn't really clear on who this guy was. I mean, I knew that he was the guy from the past, but I still had no idea yet what was going on.
Yeah, I have to agree. This is also one of the things about this movie is the amount of concern. I know every parent would be concerned if they couldn't find their child, but the way that she acted, you kind of would get the feeling that something deeper was going on. And at this point in the movie, I really, I was kind of in that, oh man, I have to see what's happening. I couldn't really figure it out, but I knew that there was something along the lines that went deeper than her experience or the experience that happened those many years ago.
Oh, and Lupita, she's just a brilliant actress. Oh my God, she just carried this thing. But at any rate, so later that night, and actually, we notice when she goes to put her son to bed that he points out it's 11:11. So that's another series of coincidences that we see adding up that prompts Adelaide to tell Gabe about her childhood trauma, about what had happened to her. And we see a little bit more of her version of what happened to her at the time that we hadn't seen earlier. But she thinks that a doppelganger is coming to get her. And Gabe is the husband that Kristi and I were describing both of ours to be last week, which is just like, nah, babe, it's fine. Like, we're going to hang out at the beach, So he's kind of really funny, and she's kind of losing her shit. And right about that time, it just like a cliche, which they make a joke about, the power goes off. And Gabe's like, well, great, and he mentions also that, we need to be more like that other family, the Wilsons. They have a backup generator. So he goes to deal with that.
Well, remember, I think it wasn't that the scene as well when she was talking about she had a doppelganger or something was coming to get her. And then he was like, well, I know I can beat your ass.
Yeah.
I know I can beat you up, so I think that I'll
be able to beat her up just fine. I was like, wrong thing to say.
That was so funny.
So Adelaide, right off the bat, she calls 911, which I was like, that's so refreshing, because you see these horror films and you're just like, why are you doing stupid shit? Like, she calls 911 and Gabe's like, man, we're fine. I'm just going to go scare these people off. And he makes two attempts of like, okay, you're trying to scare us. Silly, like, leave. And then he goes back out again. He's like, I'm going to go crazy if you don't leave. And then finally, and it's so relatable in an era where toxic masculinity has been defined, and all these other horror movies, the man just goes running out like a crazy person. You see a very human side of this man. Was like, he's in this role to protect his family. He goes and gets the baseball bat. He does what a man is quote unquote supposed to do, but he's scared. Yeah. And you can't blame him. These four creeps are just standing out there staring at him. So he goes out with the baseball bat, and oh my God, this moment. Two of the family members, so they're standing on the porch. So just imagine, you've probably seen still photos if you've heard anything about this film, and they're dressed in red, but other than that, they are them. And he goes and gets the baseball bat, and he's like, I'm going to get crazy now, kind of like still hoping he doesn't have to. And the father of the other group, like, comes barreling at him, just making the most heinous, like primitive sort of screams. The two kids peel off and they move at like an unnatural pace, and their physical like movements are just off, and they take off and they basically go and surround the family, like the back of the house. And so you get that moment that is delicious, I think, in any sort of home invasion horror film where the family's trying to lock the door and you're like, oh God, are they going to get it locked in time?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, though, the family does get it. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just say really quick, when we were in the theater, somebody made a comment out loud when they show up on the driveway. Somebody said really loud, "Look like somebody just got out of juvie." And everybody in the theater starts laughing their asses off. I mean, which was great because this is when shit starts to get real and everybody's like, what's going on? I mean, strangers were holding strangers' hands during this whole, like, people breaking into the house piece, and people were totally freaked out, covering their faces. And so it was just really funny. The entire theater heard it. It was really funny. So I thought, with those jumpsuits, he was like, look like somebody just got out of JV.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on. I just had to add that.
Oh, yeah, no. Oh, and also, Adelaide had mentioned that the police were going to take 15 minutes to get there, basically. So, they're not going to get saved anytime in the near future. So they're in the living room and they're cornered by this family. And they're basically kind of, without words, just sort of herded to sit down on the couch. And the other family is standing across from them. And we get a better look. They're wearing these red suits like they just got out of juvie. They have really sharp, like, golden scissors, and they also all have one glove, which I'm not really sure what that was about. But it doesn't.
It's a Michael Jackson reference. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, but okay. I was just kind of curious why. But
and the red jumpsuits is Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a lot of significance to red for red. But anyways, okay. So, and also we see that the one who looks like Jason actually has, Jason, the child, the son in this movie, has a different mask on. And that's something that we've seen on Jason himself, is that he has a mask. So you get a good look at this family, and they make Adelaide handcuff herself to the table. And Adelaide's doppelganger, who we find out is called Red, starts talking. And oh my God, her voice was so creepy, you guys. It was so creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like whisper talking, like it's difficult for her to speak. And basically each one who's like the other squares off. So Red makes Adelaide handcuff herself. And the one who is there, who we find out is Abraham, hurts Gabe and drags him outside. And then the little girl, Zora, her doppelganger, basically Red says, run. And we had heard before that she's a runner, and she takes off, and the doppelganger takes off after her with this like maniacally freaky ass face.
That face. Damn,
so,
girl.
Yeah, and then Abraham's Jason's is called Pluto. That's the one with the mask on that we haven't seen his face yet. And he has a really creepy physicality to him in particular. He kind of like hops around, jumps around, really scary. It's hard to explain. But Adelaide whispers to her son, Jason is into magic tricks, and she whispers to him, show him one of your tricks. And we had seen earlier, like, one of the tricks is getting locked in a cupboard. He ends up tricking Pluto into doing that. But at any rate, this scene, I want to talk about this scene because it scared the shit out of me. So one of my favorite horror films is The Strangers, the first one.
Yeah.
Just that Jason feel where you're helpless and you can't do anything. Sorry, Kristi, go ahead. What were you going to say about that?
I really did. From the beginning of when they first show up on the driveway, you really do get a major like Strangers vibe in this whole scene, all these scenes, because it's just really similar feeling, like you said, that fear. The fear that you're experiencing is the same kind of fear that I felt for these people in that movie too.
Yeah. Yardley, did this scene scare you?
Well, I thought that this scene was cool. Yeah, it was definitely creepy, especially when Pluto, what was it, Jason that pulled this mask up, or did he do it? I can't remember which one.
He tricked Pluto. Basically, this is where we start to see they're in a cupboard together, or like a closet thing. And Jason does movements and gets Pluto to follow his movements. And then lifts his mask up, and Jason and Pluto lifts his mask up, and we see Adelaide had mentioned that Pluto loved fire and had an accident, and his whole bottom half of his face is burned. So
yeah, because we noticed that Jason, from the very beginning of the movie, part of that magic trick was him trying to get that thing to kind of light up, and it never did. And since we know that the tethered were, part of their creation was to kind of have the tethered. The tethered were supposed to control the people up top, but part of the reason why the experiment went awry was the fact that the tethered didn't have souls or something like that. And rhythm was kind of a theme as well in this. So I think that whatever was going on between the doppelganger and up top, of course, Pluto ended up burning himself up, and Jason wasn't able to fully realize his magic trick. But I thought that it was pretty cool. And even if you look at some of the board games in the background, it had that like Who's Who or something, and I think a magic thing that was upside down. So it was some pretty cool things that maybe that was the problem. Like when I was watching the movie, I was spending too much time trying to look around at shit and trying to figure stuff out. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I did notice the board games, and I thought that it was really cool that it was highlighted by being in the middle.
Yeah, one of those board games is actually like there's different faces and you like match the faces. It's an old 70s or an 80s game that I remember. That's not the one you're talking about, the Who's Who or whatever. So it was like those scenes really tie into the moments that are happening. And there's always some 80s pop culture, thrown in there to tie in the moment, which was so, even when it's present day, like there was still always 80s pop culture references to each scene, almost all of them. It was very interesting how they did that.
Yeah.
Did you notice that, Moni?
I did, but I was really in the moment with this. I think this taps into not only just the strangers and the home invasion thing, but I think particular dealing with a family. I was just like in the theater going, do anything, like as they're just watching these people kind of converge on them. Because I know myself, I would go apeshit. Like I would pick up anything that could possibly be a weapon and just lose my fucking mind because you're not going to do something to my kids unless you have to kill me first. Like you can do anything you want to me. You got to leave my kids alone. So that scene scared the shit out of me. And we see the variations as everyone splits off. Basically the family has separated. Gabe ends up in the boat that we had seen earlier. Abraham had dragged him in there, and they get into a big brawl, and Gabe falls into the water, but Abraham, of course, emerges and grabs him. And anyway, they turn on the boat's engine and eviscerates Abraham, which is super gross. And while that happens, you see Abraham making some sounds, and that comes into play later on. Zora tries to outrun Umbre. Is that how they pronounce it? Umbre. Anyway, her doppelganger, Zora tries to outrun her doppelganger, and the doppelganger jumps on top of a car. So you see that there's like extra human abilities that these things have. A neighbor tries to confront them. She murders the neighbor with the scissors, and Zora takes off. So she's still alive. Okay, so now we have Abraham is dead. So that's one doppelganger down. Back at the house, Jason leads Pluto into the closet, as we talked about, and Pluto gets him to do a magic trick for him. And Jason manages to run out of the closet and lock Pluto in, which really only serves to piss Pluto off, but gives Jason time and draws Red away so that Adelaide and Jason can reunite. And so let's see.
Okay.
Fireplace poker. It's hard to go ahead.
I'm sorry if I know you're about to go back to where the mom has herself handcuffed to the coffee table. Here's my problem. And maybe somebody can explain this to me, because I did not understand why she could not move the table to reach the scissors and had to use her feet. It's the coffee table. I was like, why are you sitting here trapped? It's a coffee table. Fucking scoop the coffee table across the room and grab the scissors. Like, what?
Maybe it was a super heavy one. Like it was special. I don't know.
That was like the one plot hole that was like, what? Why? It's a coffee table. Like I have a thick ass, huge coffee table, and I can still fucking move that thing across the floor.
If my kids were involved, I would have that thing on my back, and I'd just be carrying it with me.
She worked it out. She got them with her feet. She got the scissors with her feet. Cool, or whatever it was. It was a fireplace poker. Where, but that right there, that was the one thing that I was like, why can't you move the table? It's a fucking coffee table. It's not a stove. It's, like that really bothered me. But anyway, just had to get that out there. That was the one thing that was like, why? Now that's just ridiculous. Come on now.
Well, so all hell's breaking loose. And I had started to wonder at this point also why, like, as we see the daughter running around trying to get help and all these things, like, why no neighbors? Why the police haven't come? It's definitely been more than 15 minutes. Why no neighbors are hearing any of this, like, weird cries out in the boat and people killing each other? So
Well, that's explained later on in the movie.
Yes, actually. So the Wilsons, who we had seen earlier on the beach, they're in their big old house, and they had seen that. Wait, what? This is all screwed up. Anyway, they end up getting murdered in their home by their own doubles. And that scene was pretty awesome because also Mrs. Wilson, whose name I don't have here in front of me, Kitty, there we go. She ends up trying to, as she's getting stabbed to death with these scissors by her own double, she tries to tell what they call Ophelia, but basically Alexa or Google, to call the police.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it starts playing Fuck the Police.
That was hysterical. I mean, it was a gross scene, but then you've got Fuck the Police going on, like total.
Loud.
I was dying.
They're getting killed.
Just another homage to the 80s, I mean, it was just hysterical that I don't know. It was like everything was tied into that generation. It was fantastic.
But it was also kind of a point that, with the way, like, we know the different reasons why that song had to be made, but also the point of it was, it's fuck the police until you really need them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yep.
So the Wilsons, the other family at the Tylers, I'm getting so confused. Okay, the Wilsons are the family that we're following. They end up at the house looking for help because, they're thinking their neighbors can help them. They don't know that this is a thing that's not just unique to them. And they end up being able to kill all four after a bunch of struggles to the theme of fuck the police. They end up getting to kill all of the Tyler's doppelgangers, and they reunite together inside the house. And so this could be a point where, like, maybe the movie ends here and this was just an isolated incident. But they're watching on the TV that the red doubles have been killing people across the country, and they have joined their hands together, similar to Hands Across America. So the family kind of has an argument about whether they should stay in the house. Adelaide wants to keep moving and run because she's like, the other family is tethered to us. They know where we're going to go first. And so they decide to take the Tyler's car and get attacked by Kitty's doppelganger, whom she kills. But that was creepy as shit too. We see Kitty's doppelganger like gleefully cutting her own face and, pretending to have human emotions the same as others. It's pretty creepy. But Ombre, the double of her son, appears, and there's a chase sequence. And basically, Adelaide gets out of the car, confronts her son, and we kind of get a feeling that she's hesitant. We had seen her with her daughter's double too, where she's kind of hesitant to kill her own.
Sure.
And you think at the time that it's because it's so like your own child that you're hesitant to kill them, but we find out there's a deeper meaning to that later. But at any rate, she gets out of the car and she's facing off with this double of her own son. And all of a sudden, her actual son in the car goes, "It's a trap. Everybody out." And so
that was very funny. It also, the audience thought that was really funny, just because, just him with his Star Wars mask on saying "it's a trap," which is one of the major Star Wars, and then
everybody's scurrying out of the car.
And of course, he knows what his doppelganger is thinking because he is the only one that's understanding that this kid's trapping them because he's like similar mind. So it was. The reference was not lost on my movie theater audience. They totally got it and laughed about that too.
Well, and at that moment, we were laughing, but then we see that the stakes are pretty high because the audience and Adelaide start to realize that there's accelerant all trailing up to where she is. And of course, our doppelganger likes fire. So Jason gets the attention of his own doppelganger and gets him to mirror him like he had been doing in the closet, and backs up and backs up and backs up and backs up. And his doppelganger backs up in the same fashion, straight into a fire that had already been started behind him. And so that's how we see him burn up. And Adelaide is still pretty mesmerized and upset by seeing this evil doppelganger get killed in front of her. But while she and the family are distracted, the Red jumps out and grabs Jason because he's backed up so far now behind the family car that they don't see what's going on. So Adelaide runs after them. Zora and Gabe see that the beach is now full of just silent red doppelgangers joining hands. And Adelaide makes her way back to the funhouse and goes down into the tunnel where we see rabbits. We had actually seen those in the beginning. They're roaming free. They had been in cages when we first started watching this. She finds Red inside one of the mini rooms, and Red explains her plan. Red says, and we're seeing flashes of this, so it's very jarring and very creepy. She says that all this time, the underground has been filled with everyone's doppelgangers. And now it was part of a government experiment, as Yardley mentioned, to basically control the people up above by having. But the problem is these people share the same soul. So basically, you kind of almost have the tethered down below are almost soulless, but they are doomed to perpetually just repeat everything physical that their doppelganger on top is doing. And so everybody in the tethered really learns to hate the people up above because obviously they are oppressed by this just by the very nature of how the society is built, is that they can't have any joy of their own. Any sorrow experienced by the people above is also experienced by them. Red, when they first meet Red, she talks about, you got to fall in love and meet your prince, and I had no choice. I was just tied to the same version of him down below. And you had a beautiful child, and I had a child that was a little off. And then your second child got cut out of your belly. I was forced to cut it out of my own belly, and then he didn't turn out to be right, and he's been into fire and stuff ever since. So just really creepy kind of hair on the back of your neck standing up shit here. And so she talks about how she's always been a part of Adelaide, and that when Adelaide went to do her ballet dance at age 14, she also was dancing. And basically the others down below, the tethered, saw that Red was special. She didn't seem to be quite as tied. She seemed to be a little more capable of more independent thought. And so basically the dancing led her out of the tunnels into the funhouse where they had first met. And from that point on, she basically made a plan to get everyone from the tethered out from underneath and out into the open and basically kill their doppelgangers and be able to live, in the sun and above and make their own choices. So they have a fight, and the fight scene is so creepy because Red is fighting to the dance that they did when they were 14 together. And of course, she's more nimble. She's a little bit stronger, it seems like. And Adelaide is just kind of getting her ass kicked. And every time Adelaide moves, obviously Red knows what she's going to do and moves quicker. So it becomes this dance of life and death. And Adelaide does manage to overpower Red, and she is stabbing her. And then Red, the last thing she does as she's already dying, is whistles the same tune that Adelaide had whistled when they first met in the funhouse so many years before, which is the Itsy Bitsy Spider. And that spider is supposed to be a lot of things, but kind of a significance of something people find less attractive that crawls up from underneath and kind of disrupts your daily life. And we had seen a spider in the house, in the beach house. Adelaide was deciding to go to the beach, whether to go to the beach or not. So, and she doesn't kill it, which I thought was weird because I would have killed that thing in a second or put it outside or whatever people do, but she didn't get rid of it in any way. She didn't move to take that spider away.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because as the whistling starts, we see Adelaide, that Red is already going to die, but Adelaide still has handcuffs on her. She has a chain, which I found really significant to be kind of shackled to your own self the whole movie. She ends up strangling Red the rest of the way to death. And she lets out a sound that is very primal and very much like the sound that we've heard the tethered made to communicate throughout the film. And after Red dies, she figures out that Jason is in a locker there, pulls him out of the locker and tells him very naively that everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be like it was. On the one hand, she's trying to convince her son, to not be scared and to come with her. But there's something off about the encounter. What are your guys' thoughts about all this?
Well, Jason was in the locker, so he heard the stuff that they were talking about in the story. So that kind of goes into what happens, at the very end of the, of the movie. But the thing that I found the most interesting is you're also faced with a dilemma of who the fuck you should be worrying for. I mean, like rooting for, because Red is the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't. Yeah, that's. Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
She's the victim of oppression. You can see why she's angry. On the other hand, up until now, in my opinion, like Adelaide had no way of knowing that she had caused this pain to someone else, but also that's a metaphor for a lot of other things that have happened in our history where our ignorance led us to quote unquote not know the kind of pain that we were leading others that were more oppressed to feel,
Yeah. Yeah. At the time I was watching this, I hadn't really tied all that together. And honestly, I think when you're watching a film like this, I don't think, on the surface, I think that's what he wanted. He wanted us to just really get into a good movie and then later kind of piece things together and go, oh, okay. And that's kind of what happened to me. At the time, I had I kind of figured out the ending, especially after this scene. So I was a little freaked out about how her behavior, which pretty much verified that I was right in what I was thinking. But it's like really sad because if these people weren't trying to kill the other one, if they weren't tied to each other, you want them to, they're human. You want them to have their own life. I mean, it's sad that it has to be one or the other.
Yeah, 100%. So another thing, just to kind of bring it back too, is that Red was the only one, albeit she doesn't speak well, but she's the only one that we know of that uses human as we know it language. The rest use a lot of primal sounds that seem to mean something to them, but don't mean something to the people up above. So,
which I'm sure is at the time when this was going on, when, this was what kept them under there. Like they couldn't communicate with each other. They were literally just mirroring something that was happening above, and they didn't have the ability to form conversation. I mean, like, except for a couple of sounds, that was really it. So up until this point, that's literally probably one of the main ways they just did their thing, and they were just kind of these shallow, hollow mirrors of something else.
Well, and that's another symbol of oppression is when you don't allow people education or communication, ways to organize, because that's always been the threat to whatever oppressive government or system that you're in is once people are able to communicate and once they're able to organize and once they're more educated, then they're able to move forward with, maybe things that you don't like as the oppressive government. So it's really interesting. And just to mention again, up until now, we're kind of like, but Red said she was special, so maybe that's why she's able to speak. However, the family reunites, and we do see shots of the Hands Across America style of these red figures, people dressed in red, holding hands all the way across mountains. Really powerful, really creepy. And also, just as we mentioned too, I want to go back a little bit, is as she's talking about how they're made to mirror everything that happens above. Holy shit, that's creepy. Like, I was like, zombies are the old thing. These guys are the new. Like, the way that they're moving and the way that they're like moaning and groaning instead of able to speak. Oh my God, like how creepy is it to think of like people down below you doing the same thing you're doing, but like more poorly. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
So the family's reunited. They're driving in a car. Adelaide's driving. And she, she has a flashback. And the family's all happy and everything. That shows that when she first met Red in the funhouse, that Red had knocked her out, chained her to a bed with handcuffs, took her Thriller shirt, and walked out into the real world. So the big twist, is that the Adelaide we've been watching is actually the doppelganger, which now explains why the Adelaide we've been watching didn't want to see her tethered children die, couldn't talk very well sometimes, didn't kill spiders because she had some kind of respect for that whole level of crawling out of somewhere. And yeah, so Jason looks at his mom and she kind of gives a little grin, and he looks very uneasy. And then he puts on his mask. And again, just the ending of seeing the red doppelgangers holding hands and knowing that things are going to change in America now, because the tethered are probably by and large, just by their brutality, have probably killed most of their doppelgangers and are now above ground, and life is going to be what they make of it.
So here's a question.
What do you? Yeah.
Was this happening? Like, how long? Where does this where? And I guess they don't really reveal this in the movie, but are we talking about? At first, I thought it was just this city, like that this was happening. These experiments were happening in. But then at the end, it shows it's not just a city. That are they implying it's every person or just like I just kind of that piece I could never fit together.
That quote at the beginning said that there were just so many tunnels under us. So I would imagine it was trying to imply that it's possible that there could be that many. It's not. But I also read something. There are a few things that I'm like, wait, how did that happen? And why did that happen? And the best way that I could say about this movie is to take it as sort of like a dream. Try not to take it too literally, because there are some things that you'll start thinking about that'll make you a little nuts. But yes, best I can tell, I think that is that your impression, Yardley, that it was something that happened all the way across America to everybody?
I could see how anyone who wants to believe that it's all of America, I could see how they could believe it based on the Hands Across America thing. But I didn't really think about it too much. I didn't think about it too much. I just assumed that it was pretty much the United States, a lot of Americans, rather. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we know that, there had to be experiments that weren't successful along the way. But I think the point of the tunnels and the Hands Across America is showing that that these clones, kind of were all over the place. And I don't think that there was anything referenced to say that it was going on anywhere else outside of America, was there?
Not at this point, but they could have so many sequels with it spreading across the world or from a different family's point of view. Like, this lends itself to so many franchise opportunities that I kind of hope they don't take, because I don't think it could be as good, but it's there. The ability is there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you've already revealed so many different there's so many messages in this movie, plus the twist at the end. It's like, what else could you possibly put in a movie that's going to really be really revealing in another one. So I hope they don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of just deeper meanings that I wanted to go through. There are so many things. If you just Google it, there's so many things out there. But a couple things we didn't come to. Us is also can be U.S., like as in America. So, of course, we talked about this being across America. Hands Across America, apparently I say only because I guess for the amount of effort and the amount of people that it took, only raised $16 million and kind of became a punchline in the 80s for sort of just sappy. And, so it was kind of having that representation of the tethered being the oppressed that Hands Across America was supposed to be raising money for, was kind of a symbolic there. And the rabbits. So the rabbits reoccur throughout the movie, and they're strongly associated with the tethered. We are led to assume, which I apparently hadn't assumed this, so this was news to me, that the tethered were eating the rabbits. But also Adelaide goes into a literal rabbit hole when she's trying to find her son, and a metaphoric one when she learns more about the tethered. There's also the thought about rabbits as lab animals, which was an image that I kept coming to when I was watching it. And basically the tethered were a government experiment to try to control the people above as well.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is, "Let's go down the rabbit hole." So as she was going down there and the rabbits were everywhere, that's the first thing I thought of was, oh, she is literally going down the rabbit hole. I hadn't even thought about the rest of it as far as with rabbits, but I definitely caught the rabbit hole reference, and it made me chuckle a little bit.
And then kind of like spiders, rabbits are portrayed a bunch of ways in different cultures. One of the things is they're tricksters who defy conventions, that they survive overcoming negative situations through their wits, which spiders are kind of known for surviving no matter what. And so the tethered could probably really relate to how rabbits behave.
That's a good point. Well, also, rabbits are things that experiments are performed on and that were cloned. So, yeah.
The song that I got 5 on it, it turned into a horror theme during the film. Peele says he chose it in part because he was struck by the beat and the inherent cryptic energy, almost reminiscent of Nightmare on Elm Street soundtrack. But Esquire mentions that there's a deeper and possibly unintentional layer to consider. The chorus is sung by Michael Marshall, who says he felt erased from its history and has earned very little in royalties. Now it's his tune is soundtracking a movie that's all about erasure.
And also, did you notice that when Adelaide was when she was talking to Jason and she was talking about you got to do things on beat, but the whole time she's trying to show him how to be off beat, she was off beat, and that was because she didn't have soul.
Yeah.
Nope. I was like, why is she so offbeat trying to teach him about rhythm? Yeah, that was another clue. I missed all the clues. Did you guys see the twist coming?
I didn't, honestly. Not
I
until
did halfway through.
Later in the movie.
Yeah, I did about halfway through. It just, once the, because I remembered at the beginning, she had come face to face, and then they pretty much blacked out that entire piece that happened. We knew all of a sudden she's just sitting at a therapist office not speaking. And so I was starting to think, I wonder if they switched places. Like, that's kind of what I was thinking. I didn't know how it happened, and I didn't know what they were. I just knew something weird's happened, and now these people are showing up, and they're a literal copy of the other ones. She's already seen hers, and she was experiencing these weird feelings, which, of course, she was, because she's the tethered who knew what her inherently subconsciously was knowing what her other person was doing. So she had her weird feelings were because she was tied to this other woman. The only thing I had a problem with is when they say the political aspects of this and the oppression piece. What I don't like is when they're also comparing these people with like, oh, they don't have a soul or whatever like that. I mean, I get it's not supposed to be exact. I just didn't like how they referenced that. Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so if this is supposed to be political and about oppression, maybe that's because that's how some people viewed at that time. I don't know, but that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was kind of like, that's not really accurate, and maybe that was the point, was not to be accurate. I don't know. Anyway,
Yardley, you were.
Well, the movie isn't necessarily just about one thing, though.
Right.
Which is, it's just so many layers to this.
Right. That's what I figured. But again, I was like, that first piece was like, that kind of like hit me weird. And then I'm like, I know not everything is meant to be about one message. So I get that that's probably not what the intention was, but it did, like, in my head kind of tick something like, whoa, well, that's not really true. Like, what's that supposed to mean? But anyway, that was just my one little kind of, But anyway, yeah, I figured I had a guess. And then at the end, when I officially started getting confirmation, like official, like, yep, is when she started going down the rabbit hole, like when we were talking about the rabbit hole. At that, and then when she was fighting Red, I knew officially, yep, she's the one. Like, I figured it out then.
Yeah. So talking about messages and what's on the nose, a lot of people were wondering before this came out if this was going to be about race. I'm so dang happy to see a happy middle-class Black family play the role of, just everything normal in society, everything that should have been happening in film for a long time. And so, of course, there's messages in that with oppression and injustice and that kind of stuff. But also, it's just nice to see someone different playing the roles, and they're not different. They're what you see every day, and I don't understand why we haven't done this sooner, but I loved that. So just basically having them play the happy family And then you see, well, mostly happening until we find out that Adelaide is not really a part of that as much, but spoilers.
Yeah.
And anyway, did you guys have any final thoughts on the film or anything?
Well, that I was going to say that as well. When at the beginning of the film, when you're going through all of this, I think it made me happy. And at the time, I didn't know there was going to be any political messages at all. I thought this was just going to be straight on horror, crazy, scary. And I'm like, yes, again, happy that the main characters are all African American, and the white people end up being the ones that die, and that needs to happen more.
Yes.
It shouldn't be so focused on like this, but unfortunately, that's the history of film, and people get angry when it's discussed, but it's the truth, and the fact that it stands out just shows you just how just ridiculous that is. And it made me happy to see that it shouldn't be that way. There should just be, no matter who's making the film, there should just be African American families as leads in these movies, in all movies.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to come from an African American director or writer. Like, why isn't, or Muslim or Indian or whatever, anything and everything should just be, because we should all be because that's real life.
Told about all of
it's
us.
real
Yes.
life. And so that's what, unfortunately, besides the fact that there was a political message, that was not political. It just is a message. I don't think politics necessarily are involved in that, but it unfortunately is in some ways. But
not
definitely,
even a message. It's fucking normal people. Get over it. There's a female lead in the superheroes. There's black family lead in this number one movie probably this weekend. Get over it. Like, learn to love it, because this is the world you're living in now. So
exactly. So that it made me happy when I saw that, and it made me happy that, and I don't want to sound weird, but I kind of wish even the other family was black. I just wanted it all to just be normalized and just get it out there, and it not. But
I did like how they showed that family had way more like issues, just trying to be rich and not really happy with marriage. They're fucking hilarious that way. So
yeah, that's true. And her name was Kitty. That made me laugh. My grandma's name is Kitty, but it just makes me laugh. Even though my grandma's name is Kitty, I still find that name hysterical. So anyway, I thought that was funny. But yeah, so enough of that conversation. I mean, for me, it did make me happy, but also is frustrating at the same time. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yardley, final thoughts on the film, and also when you're finished, take us into the slash film review.
Yeah, well, I kind of like how it showed how we think of ourselves, and it also kind of exposes like a shadowy side that everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And because it was just the fact that they could see the doppelgängers as strange and different, even though they looked exactly like them, they still kind of felt like they weren't equal. They weren't equal to them. Mm-hmm. And then you had a lot of things in it, basically, when we talk about class, because I think it was like an escalator that you could see. I think that they went down, but it only went down.
Yeah.
So, kind of that might be kind of symbolic of, the people at the bottom, they have a harder go at it, having to go uphill, you know what I mean, on an escalator.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Trying to be like everybody else. So that was something that I noticed that I thought was kind of cool. And I actually got to say, also you can kind of think of it along the lines of the people down below were kind of like the forgotten Americans who've fallen through the cracks. You see what I'm saying?
Literally,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, so it's there was a lot of nice things. And as far as a slash film, just a slash film had a review podcast and an article on all of the critics on there were kind of giving their opinion on different topics concerning the movie. And I think they're a lot of film school people. So if you want to kind of get a little deeper in why some of these things were done, there's nothing better than to listen to a bunch of film, people who are in film school and people who kind of have been educated more along the lines to probably see some things that, a lot of us don't. So if you go to slashfilm.com, there's a Us Review podcast as well as an article. And then, of course, you mentioned earlier that there were a ton of Easter eggs. This is one of those things that the more you definitely have to buy it. And every time you watch it, you're going to see something else. Yeah. And I think that, and honestly, I'm calling it now. I think that Lupita Nyong'o's probably going to get an Oscar nom for this.
I hope so. I really hope so. I know it's a horror film, but gosh darn it, it's time. So.
Yeah.
Hey, Netflix had a chance to win an Oscar, so, believe it or not, you know what I'm saying, a superhero film had a chance. So, I think that the Academy is definitely going to have to kind of open it up. Wasn't Toni Collette up for an Oscar this year, right?
Hereditary?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally believe that his performance was equal, if not better, to what got Toni Collette nominated. So we'll see what happens for the rest of 2019.
Well, didn't he get nominated for Get Out or no? Or did he get snubbed and people were pissed? I can't remember now.
What, Peele? Didn't he win an I thought that he won something for it. He won an Oscar for it in something. I can't remember, but yeah, he did.
So I could absolutely see her being nominated for this. I thought they all did amazing. That entire family playing two different people, playing opposite ends of one person.
Moving differently.
Totally.
Making different sounds, completely different.
I mean, even the kids, I was blown away.
But let's talk about this real quick before we wrap up. We were talking about along the lines of the character of Red, Natalie. Yeah, well, when you look at it, you do kind of, well, at least for me, I was like, well, damn, I mean, who should I have been rooting for? You know what I mean? Because, one of these people got a bum rap, and maybe part of the point is that sometimes to get up out of your situation, you're forced to do dastardly things to try to make it. So I think that's another point. But I really feel sorry for that character. You're like, damn, that's really fucked up.
You do, because if you think about it, the girl Red, who is actually the one that ends up making it above, she becomes a normal person with feelings, who loves and cares, and that's cares about her kids, cares about her doppelgangers' kids, and she was the one from below who was quote unquote, just a tethered person who wasn't supposed to have that.
Once you evolve to be able to get an education, once you're able to communicate, look at all the things that are available to you and what you could become.
Exactly.
A great mom.
When you're not stuck in this laboratory, just following what everybody else is doing, you have the option and the open door to come out and you get the best of everything. Well, magically you become a successful, good, happy person. Who would have think? What a concept. So, yeah, I mean, of course you feel sorry for who wasn't Red, who wasn't Red, down below, because it was originally her life that was taken, and she was down there, but also she was then, put down there and her opportunities were taken from her. So you feel sorry for all of them because they didn't have the opportunities. So I agree, Yardley. It's it's not bittersweet. It's just sad. Unfortunately, they have to kill this other person to be their person, or they think they do. I don't know. I mean, do you have to? Did you have to kill the other people? I know that was kind of what they felt like they had to do to take their lives, but take over their lives. But in theory, what if they didn't rise to take, what if they didn't just showed up and was like, hey, by the way, I've been down there being your doppelganger, but let's all live a good life, and I know I look like you, but I can make my own thing. You know what I mean? Would they have been heralded as bad people? I don't know. It was just something I'm like, well, shit, if you guys didn't kill everybody, I would have been a little weird having somebody that looked just like me, but we could have worked it out. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, since we have you on the horn, lady, we could talk about this movie all day, but I suppose we should roll forward into your socials and what we can expect for next week.
Yeah, next week, I thought we would do, it's probably going to be the week after, actually. I'll be gone on spring break all next week.
I'll be gone as well.
Yeah, so we're probably going to have to skip next week. We'll try. I was thinking we'll talk about this after the show, of maybe if anybody has time, whether it's me and Moni or me and Yardley or all three of us, do another weird news episode. I have a ton of weird news saved as options for this one, and I picked that one, but I have a ton of them. So if we could, we could literally make an episode.
We can talk
out of
about the Florida Man
news.
challenge.
We can do that. I got all kinds of shit saved in on my doc. So I thought, you know what, we could actually make an episode out of this and then post it next week. So anyway, talk about that later. So week after, we're going to do the witness stories of black-eyed children. It's kind of been the last couple of years has been kind of coming up in the funnel of weird paranormal shit. Yeah. And I
look forward to this one. It's scary.
Happened upon a podcast of one of my favorite podcasters, Astonishing Legends, did a huge episode about black-eyed children, and I had never heard of it before, really. I mean, it was kind of a conversation, in and out on Reddit or whatever, but it's an incredibly creepy stories of people who have witnessed these, they call them black-eyed kids or black-eyed children. So we're going to discuss the stories of some of these witnesses and the fallout after their run-ins with the black-eyed children.
Nice.
And then
where can we find? Go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me at creepin_it on Twitter and pretty much creepin at Kristi on Instagram.
Yes. Mr. Yardley?
Hey, you can follow me on Twitter at militant_marker.
And I am Rebel Moni on Twitter and Moni Bear on Instagram. And you will see all of the upcoming WonderCon shenanigans and all the people that we get to hang out with and the creators. And it's going to be a blast. So until then, enjoy your spring break, creepers. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, but that's not much. So just be safe and have fun. And we will talk to you soon.
Just another passing feeling, like dirt on my hands. Just another joke revealing the ceiling my fate as a wandering man. I tried to see, but I could not see. I tried to wait, but impatiently. And I tried to write,